lot of variety of vegetables, fruits and other food items that are very tasty and healthy too. How do you think would the farmers select seeds? The plants and animals that gave a good yield were generally selected and used for sowing and breeding for the next year.
The plants and animals that were sown and bred selectively while protecting them is called as domestication.
Although people adopted domestication and growing crops, there were many others who continued hunting and gathering foods in the forests. The agricultural practices also differed among these people.
Shifting agriculture or podu was practiced by the people.
Before we learn about the practices in detail in the next lesson, try finding out what is podu agriculture or shifting agriculture. The people slowly understood that the fertility of the soil can be maintained through tilling and manure.
The use of plough and animal manure helped the people in many ways, and they did not have to go in search of new fertile lands every few years.
This simply means that they combined farming with rearing of animals that they used for plowing the fields, transportation and for putting manure in the fields. Can you guess what were the factors that made the nomadic lives of the people in the olden days shift to the settled lives? As the people began to sow seeds and grow plants, they stayed at one place for a long time, looking after the plants, watering it, nurturing it and protecting it from birds and animals.
They waited till the grain ripened, but there were huge harvests of the grain that they could not eat all at once. Hence, they had to store it for long periods of time.
This eventually led to the settled lives of the people in the earlier days when they began to build huts of stone, wood, mud and dried grass. Anybody will surely need vessels and containers to store the grains and food items.
The vessels of the people in the early days mainly consisted of pots of different kinds. They were made mainly from mud. The pots were painted and decorated. It was much later that utensils were made from metals.
The early farmers developed new kinds of stone tools to clear the forest by cutting the trees and the branches. Any guesses what these were called?
The neoliths were the new kind of stone tools that were developed by the early farmers to cut the branches and trees.
The early farmers carefully selected the stone with the right shape, which was then ground on a rock to give it an edge like that of an X. Here's a small task for you. Can you find out the place from where the earliest evidences for the cultivation of crops were found? Any guesses?
The earliest evidences for the cultivation of crops were found in Balochistan around 9,000 years ago, in Kashmir around 5,000 years ago, and in Bihar around 4 or 5,000 years ago.
The earliest evidences for domestication in the Deccan were found on the borders of Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. Large numbers of ash mounds were found in these places in large areas. Archaeologists assume that the hunters in these areas began to rear cattle around 5,000 years ago. They believe that the cattle were tied in special places which eventually accumulated a lot of cow dung. The dung kept drying as days passed. This accidentally might have caught fire during festivals, which would have caused the ash mounds.
Evidences of ash mounds were found in Andhra Pradesh in the districts of Anantapur, Kurnool and Mahbubnagar.
In addition to the ash mounds, stone blades, rudimentary handmade pots and Neolithical stones axes were also found. So students, hope you have learnt all about gathering of the food in the olden days. See you in the next class.